Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you for session 14. I'm going to be introducing Brian and Karen Tucker, and they're going to be talking to us today about transforming literacy teaching in the era of higher standards. Karen and Brian actually work together. They both teach 5th grade across the hall from each other, and they're both adjunct professors at Judson University. They've also written and co-authored Transforming Literacy Instruction in the Era of Higher Standards for grades 3 to 5. So I'm so excited to hear their presentation today, and I know they're going to have lots to share. If you want to join us at home and be part of the Twitter feed, the hashtag, as they've been for all the sessions, right? Hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering. Space for this session, it will be hashtag 14.
I think it's our turn now, right?
It is our turn.
Have fun.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much to Claire for getting us up and on. She has been a wonderful tech person. So I think that the next book that I suggest Claire and Tammy write is about technology, because she has really just helped us a lot. So first, we of course want to thank Chris Lehman and the Ed Collab for not only giving us this opportunity to share with you, but for a wonderful day of professional development. We've been watching and learning along with you. I have my notebook and notes all over the place, and I know Brian does too. We are in the separate levels of our home, so we're across the hall at school, and at home we're upstairs and downstairs learning and writing together. So thank you to Chris and the Ed Collab and all the wonderful people who we've been listening and learning from today, Phil and the people this morning in the keynote, and Donna Lynn and Maggie Roberts. It's just been such a great day, and we are so happy to be sharing with you today. So thanks to everybody who put this together. So anything else, Mr. Tucker?
No. You go ahead.
Okay, so we wanted to talk with you today about some of our learning over the last several years. We had the great opportunity to write a book about transforming literacy teaching with another colleague of ours, Maria Walther. I know Maria's out there, so hello, Maria. Thank you for being with us today. She wrote the Transforming book for kindergarten through 2nd grade teachers. And when we started our journey, we realized that transforming literacy teaching was same, but different than many of the things that we were doing before. So if you don't know the book, Same, but Different by Jenny Sue Kostecki Shaw, definitely go out and find that. So what we would like to share with you today is some of the things that we learned on our teaching journey, that we learn and relearn and come back and visit quite often as we are kind of finding those touchstones about best practices in literacy teaching. And so we want to start today with a quote, and it is from Peter Johnston, who is one of our favorite literacy leaders that we stand on the shoulders of each and every day. And that is that when we are teaching reading and writing, that we're not just teaching that curriculum, but we are teaching those children, those people who sit in front of us each and every day, that we're teaching those people who read and write. And so they are at the focus of our instruction, and that is what keeps us coming back to the classroom each and every day. And that's why we love reading and writing, and that's why we love teaching reading and writing. And we know that's why you love teaching and reading and writing every single day, and you love those children. And that's why you're sitting here on a Saturday learning about reading and writing and finding those practices that you can take back with you on Monday morning. If you haven't read Peter Johnston's work, this quote comes from his second book, Opening Minds, but his very first book, Choice Words, has a lot to say to teachers about the language that they use in their classroom, about what we say to kids and how important that language is. And so this is a quote that we want to start out with, that we remind ourselves about each and every day. And so we want to share with you some things and some practices in our classrooms that really have helped us transform our own literacy teaching and help keep us focused and rooted each and every day. And so we want to start with the whole idea of building a literacy community in your classroom, and how important that is when you are working with students each and every day, and getting kids to think about sharing their literacy lives with each other, and the importance of sharing your own literacy life with your students. And one of the things we do is we have students keep readers and writers notebooks, and we have them share their reading and writing with each other. And I think Brian has a great example of a student that he shared his reading life with, and she got engaged with talking about a book with him over a period of time. So I'm going to let him share that story, and then we're going to talk about a couple of examples of how students can share their reading and writing with each other.
So along with teaching and adjuncting at Judson, I also am a student at Judson. I'm pursuing my doctoral degree there. And so one of the courses that I was engaged with, we were reading a book that I thought was really good, and I thought students would enjoy that book. And so I brought that book in, and I was able to share that through a book talk with students, not only in my classroom, but in Karen's classroom. And so we had one of her students pick it up and decide she was going to read that along with me. And so she and I were able to confer and talk about the things that we were enjoying. And it was just a great experience that a student was interested in something that I was reading, and was able to communicate that with each other.
So when you have students keep readers and writers notebooks, make sure that you're keeping a reading and writing notebook as well, so that you're sharing your reading and writing with them as well. The other thing we do is we talk to students about making sure that they're thinking about their own personal reasons for reading and writing. So at the beginning of the year, or even coming back at other points during the year, we have students think about why they read and why they write. And it was great to hear our speakers this morning in the keynote talking about student voice and having student voices in your classroom. So we go and we ask students at the beginning of the year about why they read and why they write. And so they write these quotes, and we talk about their quotes and their purposes for both reading and writing. And this is an example of a bulletin board that we created about reading. And here are some of their quotes, their individual quotes about reading. And it's great because they get at a lot of those personal reasons for reading. And they do the same thing with writing as well, about why they write. And it allows them to stop and think about some of their personal purposes and personal reasons for both reading and for writing. And so we put these up in the classroom, and we talk about them, and we look at these reasons for reading and reasons for writing, and it allows us to have that conversation about writing and about reading beyond just some of those things about those lessons that we teach. And so students look at these, and we talk about these, and we leave these up not only at the beginning of the year, but we also come back to them maybe about halfway through the year or 3/4 of the way through the year, so that they can look at those personal reasons. We find this is a great way to bring student voice into the classroom, so that they can have a way to say, this is why reading and this is why writing is important to me. After we do that, we also like to have students have an opportunity to think about what it is that experienced readers and writers do. As we're building that community, one of the ways that we do that is we want them to focus on what it is that experienced readers and writers do. A long time ago, we would ask kids to think about what good readers and writers do. And we knew that that was not necessarily good language because Peter Johnston told us that. And so now we think about talking about experienced readers and writers do. And so we're going to talk a little bit, I'll let Brian talk a little bit about how we utilize these lists to bring into our classroom literacy community building?
So one of the things that we do at the beginning of the year is we look at, we read actually a book. We love to bring this book in at the beginning by Patricia McLaughlin, and it allows us to help students understand basically the book. Karen, help me with the title of the book again. I can't remember it.
Oh, what we know first by Patricia McLaughlin.
Thank you. What we know first by Patricia McLaughlin. So basically what the book is about is a child who is leaving their home and having to move. And she's so sad, and she's in mourning about the loss of what's familiar and the things that she's used to. And so her mother says to her, reminds her that even though they're leaving, she's taking all of her experiences with her. And so we talk to the students after we read this book about how they, when they come from 4th grade to 5th grade or from 3rd grade to 4th grade, how they're bringing all of those experiences of learning with them. And all of that stuff that they bring with them, all of those experiences apply to what they're learning, and we're building upon that. And so that especially is in the areas of reading and writing as well. So we want to make sure that we're tying back to what they've learned and to what we're teaching them this year.
So they create the lists, and after they create the lists, we create a class list by putting them on some chart paper, and the students are able to create the anchor charts, and we can type those up and put those in their readers or their writers' notebooks. And this allows them an opportunity to be able to keep these and look at these during the times when they are thinking about what kinds of things that they might be able to work on as they're thinking about doing some goal setting and some different things like that as they are creating goals as readers and as writers.
And can I just add one thing? So as we go from the lists that they're creating individually to the class list, it gives the opportunity for students to see what their students are talking about, and begin to change their own mindsets about some of the things that they understand that their classmates are talking about in terms of their experiences as readers too.
The next thing that we do is we read aloud on a daily basis. It's so important to make sure that kids are having the opportunity to read aloud and to hear books read aloud to them, because we know that it's really important for them to be able to have lots of experiences where they're exposed to lots of different types of text. So whether you're reading books out loud to them that are picture books or they're novels, it's just that opportunity. It's one more way that they are building that literacy community. It's great for them to share text. And one of the things that as intermediate teachers, we always encourage you to make sure that you're still reading picture books to kids. I've been teaching for a really long time, and I was having a conversation with a teacher yesterday about when I began my career, there were not the same number of quality texts to be able to read to kids. And so we know that there are lots of really good reasons to read to kids, and so it's just so important to make sure you're including that read aloud with your students on a daily basis, because there are so many really good reasons to be able to read to them, and the advantages of reading aloud to them are so important.
And I think, you know, you and I have talked about this before, that there are so many good picture books out there now that are really good for students to see how authors create their craft and to be able to model that for them. And so it's important that, you know, we keep always looking for those new picture books, or going back to those older ones that we know are really good, and sharing those with students so that they have those experiences too.
So we have lots of really good reasons for reading aloud and having those opportunities for us to read to them and for them, and sharing picture books with them. One of the things that we do in our classrooms is that we do keep track of the number of read aloud experiences that we have with kids. We have kids keep track of the books that they read independently, but we also recognize that it's important to keep track of the number of times that we read out loud to them, so that they see that that they are hearing books with their eyes and with their ears. And keeping track of that is important for a lot of different reasons.
And one of the great things about Karen and I within our own classrooms across the hall from each other is that we're keeping track on 2 different charts. And so here's an example of her chart where she's keeping track of each month and how many read aloud experiences. I do the same thing in my room, but I also include any time that we're reading from the social studies textbook, or that we're, you know, doing various other read alouds. It doesn't have to be just during Readers and Writers Workshop. It could be in social studies, it could be in science. So, you know, anytime that I'm reading out loud or that a student is reading out loud for the classroom, we go ahead and we keep track of that on the chart.
The other thing that it's really important to make sure, in addition to providing your students with lots of read aloud experiences, is we know that research tells us that it's so important to make sure that kids are reading and writing independently every single day. And so as we think about that, we know that there's value in kids having that time just to be reading and writing independently. We've heard in the keynote and other speakers this morning, both, I know Phil Bildner talked about it and Donna Lynn Miller talked about it, both as readers and writers, giving kids that opportunity for choice in their reading and their writing and providing that dedicated time each and every day. And I know we both know as classroom teachers that carving out that time is not necessarily easy, but we know how important that is, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or half an hour, just that time for them to be able to be reading and writing independently and allowing them that choice to do that. Stephen Creation did some great research, and he has found something that is just really powerful. And it's a great thing to remember, especially when you're talking to an administrator or a parent about why you're setting this time aside each and every day.
And one of the things that I've really come to know as a teacher is reading achievement is tied to the amount of volume of reading that you're doing with kids, the amount of exposure they're getting from authors and things like that. So the single greatest factor in reading achievement is volume.
And so just giving them that time each and every day. One of the things that we do as we're having kids read is we have them keep track of the books that they read. And probably once or twice, we were on quarters, we're on trimesters now, but we have them tally the number of books that they read. And we have lots of different readers in our classroom. We have kids that are struggling readers. We have kids that are reading above grade level, but we allow that as an opportunity to celebrate how many books that they've read. We tell them it doesn't matter if they finished 1 or 2 books during that period of time, or whether they finished 10 or 12 books. But it's that starting and finishing books that is helping them grow to become a more experienced reader, that reading those pages is helping them create that volume. Nancy Atwell talks about kids becoming voluminous readers, and that helping them become better and more engaged and becoming those lifelong readers that we want to create. So we want to celebrate that for them. And so we count the number of books that we read, not only as individuals, but as a class.
And one of the things that I think that I know that the readers enjoy in our classrooms is not only do we keep track of them per trimester, so we have a bulletin board that we count per trimester, and then at the end of the year, they count the total number. And here you see a picture in Karen's classroom of how many books that they've read for the year. And Karen, you had mentioned that, you know, you have some students who struggle with reading that might not read as many, but then you also have those advanced readers in your classroom who, again, might only read 5 or 6 books because of the length of the book. And so really, it doesn't matter the number. The kids really, they understand that because we set that up for them and help them to understand that. And so it's important that they realize that it's the number and it's the quality of book that they read.
And I know that last year's class read over 1,000 books. This year's class is trying to really hope to beat that, which I think is a really great goal. The other thing that, and I include my books in there as well. The other thing that we do try to work with students on is reading a variety of books and trying to challenge themselves to read books that are moving them from, you know, up that ladder of text complexity. And we talk about the different ways that we challenge ourselves as readers. I know that I'm a realistic fiction reader, and I occasionally read historical fiction books to challenge myself, but I'm not really a fantasy reader. And it's not just looking to read books that are necessarily harder. Challenging yourself may mean different things to different people. And so it's our role as teachers to help readers get to know themselves. And I loved listening to Maggie talking this morning about that independent reading journey and how kids begin to understand themselves through that journey and reading and understanding themselves. And I thought about how that really tied to our ladder of text complexity that we've been thinking about and working with our students on. And so we help students be able to create this and work on this and how we begin to help them understand themselves as readers through doing this process.
And one of the things that I really enjoy about when we do this activity with our students, we do it multiple times through the year. And so one of the things that I enjoy the most is when you have those kids who aren't sure where a particular book falls on their ladder of text complexity, and then you are able to have that conversation with them. You're able to negotiate with them. Well, what are you thinking? What are they thinking about it? What are you thinking about it? And so I think it's a great opportunity to confer with a student about, you know, the books that they're reading.
And I think we have an example of a ladder that is completed from a student. And so you can see what that looks like and how they analyzed what that process looked like a little bit.
So here's a picture of Sophia and her ladder of text complexity. And so she, again, spent some time thinking about the books that she had been reading through the year. And you can kind of see here, she's got the title, she's got a little bit about why she felt the book fit on the particular rung of the ladder. And you can begin to see that the level of complexity with each title goes up. And that's a great way for kids to visually see that they're reading, the books that they're reading, the complexity is increasing throughout the year.
And I think we've had some students that only have a couple of different titles on their books and, you know, on their ladders, because that may have only been what it is that they read during that course of time. And so as we talk about books, we know how important classroom libraries are. And so, you know, having lots of books in your classroom library to be able to share with students, and so that they can have access to books. And I loved how Donalyn and Travis were talking about, we certainly have students and classrooms and buildings who don't have lots of books for students to have access to. And I know as teachers, we're always trying to figure out how can we have books and put books in students' hands. And this is a great quote from Nancy, and about how important libraries are. And Brian, I'm going to let you read that because I keep forgetting that I can't see it with you.
The most important work we do as reading teachers is become so intimate with good books that we bring life with our voices to the tattered spines that line the shelves of our libraries. And one of the great, if you don't mind, one of the great things that Karen and I do, ironically, we work across the hall, we teach the same grade level, and we have an issue of sharing books. And so when we go, we have date night on Fridays where we go to a bookstore and we just sit and we look through books. And so this is a picture of her classroom where her whole front of her classroom is lined with picture books, and the back side of her room is lined with chapter books. And so my room looks very similar to this, where picture books are in the front, and we have 2 copies of each book.
And because we don't share very well, so that's a little secret about us, but we do love to have lots of books, and we know that teachers are always looking for lots of places to get books. And I know we use book clubs, whether it's Scholastic or other book clubs, or we go to garage sales or lots of different places like that to be able to try to have books to give to kids. And I love Donna Lynn's quote about, we'd rather lose a book than a child. And I know that Brian and I have lost lots of books over the years, that kids have taken them. And I love that books end up in our mailbox because, who knows, they come back 2 or 3 years later that a parent has found them under a bed. But I always love to know that they've been in good hands and a good home and kids have been reading them. So we know that libraries and books are so important. And, we want kids reading those books because we know how important just getting books in kids' hands and having kids reading and talking about them and sharing them. And so, we love to have, books in our classroom and kids talking to each other about books and sharing those books with each other.
And I think I agree with you. I think that's really important. And so one of the things that, like I said earlier, we're purchasing 2, and if one gets lost, we can always go borrow it from the other teacher across the hall. So that's always great too.
It's always good to have. We do have our students talking to each other about books, not only in our classroom libraries, but books that they're talking about. So, we always want to, that's back to building that literacy community, whether it's in our classroom or in our grade level or in our building or within families and things like that.
So one of the things that we like to do is when we welcome our students at the beginning of the year, we have the students who left us at the end of the year before, they always do book recommendations for the new incoming 5th graders. And so here you see an example of the best books from 2 years ago that students did. And they do a little writing about it and why they recommend it. And so it's always good, again, to build that classroom community, not just within the classroom you have this year, but classroom communities across different years too.
And so then I think that we introduce the kids to our libraries, but then we also talk to each other, we talk to kids about books. And so we're book talking, and kids are talking to each other because we know that, talking about books to kids and creating that classroom environment where kids are reading, and they know that reading is important to us and is an important part of the classroom community, and we put value on it, is so important. So we talk to kids about books, and we create that environment where kids are talking to each other about books, and we do that in lots of different ways. I think that one of the ways that we do that is we create lots of opportunities where they're having conversation with each other, but we also want to create opportunities where they can go and find book recommendations in lots of different ways. One of the things that I think is really important for middle grade readers to be able to do is to have a reading plan so that they have something that they're reading now, but they also know what it is that they're going to be able to read next.
And so one of the bulletin boards that both of us have in our classrooms is we try to stay on top of this, where kids are constantly updating what I'm reading now, and then they also have what they're thinking about what they're going to read next. And so it's important for them to be thinking about what that next book is, whether and who they can go to, whether it's one of us or whether it's somebody else in the classroom they feel comfortable with. And I think that's important, that they can also use this as another way. Well, my best friend is reading this book, maybe I would enjoy that. So again, it's an opportunity for them to go to that bulletin board and look at what their friends are reading.
One of the ways that we help students organize what it is that they read, and a tool for helping us organize our instruction, is that we help kids have a literacy folder so that they have a list of books that they have finished reading and books that they want to read. And so we call it a books I've read and a someday list. And I think Brian has an example of each of those.
So one of the things that we like to do is kids keep track of the books they've read all year. So when they finish something, they add it to this list. They even give it a rating if they want to. And then also they have a someday list. So anytime Karen or myself are book talking, they pull that someday list out and they're writing those titles down. Or if they're conferring with a friend of theirs about a book that they're currently reading or have finished, and they want to write that down as well, it's an opportunity for them to keep track. And so this way they're not coming to us all the time and saying, I'm not sure what to read next. If they do that, we say, well, what's on your someday list? And we put the ownership back into their hands, that they've kept track of those books that they've either read or that they want to read in the future.
And I think it's a way for us to help give students ownership of their own learning, and to continue to develop that community. Another thing that we find that has really helped us as we're thinking about that transformation of our literacy instruction, and that we find is so important for our learners, is that whole idea of collaborative conversations, about getting students talking about their learning. And this we found is so important, not just in our literacy classrooms, but in our reading and writing classrooms and literacy, but in science and social studies and in math, that students need to be talking to each other about their thinking. And as we think about doing that, we find that it's so important because it deepens their understanding of so many different things. And as we've done that, we've helped create some different things that has helped us as teachers as we explicitly teach what those conversations look like, but also help students as they help have conversations with each other.
And I know with our students, when we confer with them, we might ask them some of the questions here, and then we model that for them, and they begin to then do that with each other. And it's always good to listen in on a collaborative conversation between two students, and you hear them say, I have the same thinking because, or my thinking is different because, or why do you think that, or I wonder why, and those kinds of things. It's always nice to hear those kinds of conversations coming from them and not just from us.
And we are actually in the throes of park testing this week. And one of the things that we notice is how important it is for kids to make sure that they're providing support for their thesis statements in the test. And we feel like what they've done in those collaborative conversations has really helped prepare them for that, because they know that they need to give support for what it is that they're thinking. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we saw in the standards as they're doing that. In addition to having good collaborative conversations, and we work on that so much when we're conferring with kids. And I loved hearing Donna Lynn and Travis talking about conferring with kids, and what a great way that is to have kids practice having those conversations. And in that is a great opportunity for us to be able to do goal setting with kids. As we think about having student voice in our classroom and giving students ownership of their learning, goal setting is such a great way to do that. And when we start doing goal setting with kids, we like to start working on habits and behaviors of readers, and then we can kind of move into things that are probably a little bit more academic and weighty. And so we like to start with those kinds of things that are probably having to do with their reading lives. And so this is, as we begin at the beginning of the year, this is a great way for us to start getting to know our learners in conferences and start setting goals with them. But this is also something that we're probably still doing now, as we're helping kids work on their reading lives as well.
And one of the things, here's an example of Emily and her goal at the beginning of the year. We spent some time talking about where can students steal time throughout their day to take the opportunity to read 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half hour here and there on their way to soccer practice or gymnastics or other activities that they might be doing in the evenings. So here's an example where her goal of stealing time throughout her day. And like Karen mentioned, it's something that we revisit time and time again, because I think as kids begin to recognize what are those times throughout my day that I can do that. And in fact, it was not too long ago at the beginning of the year that our students realized that while they were waiting in line to get their picture taken, they brought their book with them, and you saw them sitting after they had taken their picture had been taken, and they were sitting and reading books for those 5 minutes that we were waiting for everybody to finish.
So we want to finish up with talking a little bit about writing and some different things that we do to help our writers in the classroom, because we love to teach writing and we love to think about how the processes of reading and writing are connected to each other. And as we were preparing for this, we went back and we were watching some of the different sessions from past educator collaborative gatherings, and we're watching one with Joe Ellen and Jeff Anderson, and he was talking about reading and writing being connected processes and in books, and how grammar and mechanics are really the glue that hold those pages together. And I loved that quote. And so we use a lot of mentor texts and different text sets. And one of the things that we did recently was we shared a text set of different wordless picture books with our students. And we talked to them about how reading wordless picture books could help them not only as readers and writers. And we got them to think about how wordless picture books, how you read those wordless picture books, and how you thought about those texts differently than when we shared those books that had words and text in them. And so we created some anchor charts, and we talked a little bit about that. And then we asked them to create their own wordless picture books as writers.
And it was really interesting to watch them within partnerships try to negotiate what were the steps, what was step one, what was step two, and so forth, and how, they really had to think about that as they were creating those steps. What did we do first? What did we do second? And sometimes they had to go back and add something that they didn't think about, or, as they were typing it up and they realized, well, maybe I needed to place this in front of this. So it was really nice to be able to see them being cognizant of their thinking as they were creating this chart.
And we had used Kate Messner's How to Read a Story as a mentor text, which it's a great piece of procedural writing. It can be used at so many different grade levels for so many different purposes. And then the next step was we had read the Journey, Quest, and Return books with students. And I know Brian had spent a lot of time with those books, and we had been working with Point of View and had encouraged his students to write their own story, taking looking at some different things and looking at those wordless picture books and looking at different points of view, and then also shared the Mark Pete books, Girl and the Bicycle and Boy and the Airplane. And so they had looked at a lot of different types of books, and then he gave them a writing assignment, which I will let him talk a little bit about and share a great example of a piece of writing that one of his students did as well.
So basically, this book, this wordless picture book, The Girl and the Bicycle, is about a young girl who she walks by a storefront and sees a bicycle in the window, and she really wants it. And she realizes that in order to get this bicycle, she has to do some chores. And so she goes around to the neighbors, and she asks, "Can I help?" And they agree, and so she befriends this neighbor, this elderly lady, and she helps her for what appears to be a year in the book. And she has a little brother, and so she's in charge of the brother. The brother comes along, and she raises enough money to get this bicycle, and she goes, and the bicycle's no longer in the window. And so I had a student decide the point of view that she was going to retell the story with was from the ice cream cone in the story. And so here you see they're in front, they're getting ready to go buy the bike, and the little brother had an ice cream cone, and it's now on the ground. And so here is our father, the ice cream man, would yell, "Ice cream for sale, $3 a cone." And more of my brothers and sisters would be eaten by torturous children with sharp teeth and evil tongues. We were all lined up in the front of the stand, and I was in the middle. I closed my eyes, hoping that I would survive another picking day. It was extremely hard to close my eye because I don't have any. Suddenly, I was jerked from the stand, and an imaginary eyes flew open. This was it. This was the end of my life. And so they go forward, and the boy drops the ice cream cone, and it's melting, and the whole idea of evaporation. So there you see it in the clouds. And so it just was a great way for our students to share wordless picture book from a different point of view.
And the very last thing that we want to share with you, just a couple of minutes left, is incorporating informational text. And we certainly do a lot with text sets with informational text, and having kids look at informational text and share their learning in lots of different ways. And one of the things that we did last year was, about this time of year when we were talking about Earth Day, we had read a couple of different books about Earth Day and taking care of the environment, and basically just said, why don't we create some posters that we can put up and around the school talking about how important it is to go green, and share some different things like that. And I think that we have an example of what one of the posters that a group did after they looked at a couple of different texts, and we put these up around the school about some ways that they had learned about some different things.
So this little mini research assignment allowed them to, like Karen was just mentioning, go ahead and create a poster, and they were able to then, like she said, put them up across the school, where the younger students could see their research, and it was very applicable to what they were learning, but also being able to teach those younger kids about some of the things that they were learning as well.
And then the very last research piece that we'd like to share with you is a group of boys who became very interested in some things that they were learning in the civil rights movement and social studies, but who had also been doing some reading in graphic novels, and wanted to combine those two passions and share some of the learning that they had learned about some important people in the civil rights movement.
So one of the things that we do toward the end of the year in social studies is we talk about more current events after the Civil War. And so, like Karen mentioned, these boys were really interested in civil rights. So they created a little book about Rosa Parks. And so it's almost in the form of a graphic novel. And they took the learning, the research, the reading that they were doing about her. And I think it was 3 boys that sat down and decided to plan out. And it was interesting, being their social studies teacher, I was able to offer them other books and other things to kind of look at and to research from. And here, you know, again, in that graphic novel format, they took some quotes from Rosa Parks here and incorporated that into their little book as well.
And I think that is it. So we just want to thank Chris and the Educator Collaborative. Claire, we made it.
You did make it.
Yeah, we did.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank
No,
you for
I'm so
such
sad it's over. We could listen to you all day. You have so
I know.
much to share.
But thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody who watched us and will watch us in perpetuity on the YouTube channel. So it was great. Thank you.
Twitter
thank you.
was on fire with all your
Yeah.
visuals. I think people really appreciated you inviting us into your classroom and letting us see it. It really helped to show exactly how you do it. I think a lot of us talk about building community, but it's clear that it's not something you just cover. It's something you're uncovering and exploring all year long. I kept thinking about Lillian Katz's quote, "Dispositions are caught, not taught." And
Yeah.
it's clear that in both of your classrooms, this is something that kids are catching and that you're such a part of it. Even with one year's class, preparing for the next year's class to be part of that community. So I think that's people left today's session and will continue to watch it and get so many ideas of how to bring this alive in their own classroom. So thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who joined us. We have another quick break, and then at 3 o'clock, we hope people come back and join us for our closing session with Chris Lehman, Caring for Our Kids, Supporting Immigrant and Refugee Children in Our Schools. And again, one last shout out for today's adopted charities. If you've enjoyed today and gotten as much out of it as I know I have, please consider donating to either Urban Word New York City, Urban Creators, or Morningside Center. Right? Thanks, everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.